that people actually eat cats and dogs?
What are you doing?
When you're hearing about stories about people eating cats and dogs, do you ever wonder what the health risks are?
What?
Welcome to the Dr. Frank and Steve podcast with your hosts, Dr. Frank Williams and Dr. Steve Snodgrass, MD, FACS, where we discuss a broad range of topics without limitations. Let's get to it. Here's Dr. Frank and Dr. Steve.
Hello, welcome. This is the Dr. Frank and Steve podcast. I'm Frank Williams, and this is my co-host, Dr. Steve Snodgrass. Today we're going to be covering something that has been in and out of the news for decades, but it's made very popular by some geopolitical talks and statements that were made. We're not here to be on the right side, rather, or the left side, or down the middle. We're just here to talk about cats and dogs. And so we're going to cover a lot of very topics of discussion when it comes to eating cats and dogs and basically sacrifices, and it's just going to be a mix of a lot of general information and some good information maybe you've never heard of or you don't know, but I think it makes for a very interesting podcast. So I'm going to let Steve start off, and then as usual I'll jump in, and then I will discuss some areas that Steve doesn't necessarily have, and then we'll just interject back and forth as we always do.
Yes, we got to have that healthy banter.
Yes.
It's this is one of those things when we came up with the topic that we're going to cover, and I thought, like, well, I'm not sure exactly what's in the world literature on all of this, and was pretty stunned to find out everything there is about it. And as you know, both of us, we always take notes before we prepare for these podcasts and that sort of thing. And like, lo and behold, before I knew it, I had like 15 pages of notes, and had gone through a lot of actual, one of the things too that we wanted to talk about was the medical aspect of this, is because there is a tremendous medical component to this. And I don't feel like that's been given a lot of coverage, but I think it's very important that we do. And even though some of it may not be exactly with just eating a dog or a cat, it's great general information to know. I believe that. And the first thing that I looked at was the Three Stooges circa 1949, Malice in the Palace. I can highly recommend that.
Exactly.
Yes. So it's just like Moe, Larry, and Shemp. They kind of like had a handle on it in 1949.
That's one of the funniest skits.
It's pretty classic.
Yes,
it's pretty, because I grew up watching them, and I think that really everybody should. So
absolutely.
There's that. But anyway, to our topic, I looked at it, and generally speaking, dogs are domesticated and they're not meant to be bred for consumption, unlike cows and pigs. And humans tamed dogs around 18,000 BC, domesticated pigs 13,000 BC, and cows 10,000 BC. So we're talking, a long time ago?
Yes.
A long, long time ago. And we wanted to cover this because it's just constantly in the news. So we wanted to just take a worldview of this, looking at it in human history. And I think it's pretty fascinating. According to the literature that I saw, where 1 million cats and 5 million dogs were eaten last year in Vietnam.
Yeah, that's China does. I think China runs about 10 million a year.
Yeah. And now
they even have a festival in their southern provinces, if they still have it, was it the city of?
It's Yulon. Yulon.
Yep, Yulon.
The Yulon Dog Meat Festival.
That's right.
And I don't know about you, but I've put that on my bucket list.
Yeah, no, that might be a little roof to go to.
So
dad jokes are going to be pretty blatant today. So
yeah, I mean we do have it's a serious subject, but you got to have a little bit of a sense of humor about it. But anyway, it's out there, and I saw where one figure was in 1 year's time, 27 million dogs were eaten in 1 year.
Worldwide.
Worldwide.
Yes.
Yes. Which, that's pretty astounding.
Yeah, even South Korea has I think it's a little over 17,000 dog farms.
Yeah,
according to the Humane Society.
And I noticed where people, I was going like, well, I understand, like, unless you're clinically depressed or suicidal, for the most part, I'm going to say that any human will do anything for self-preservation. So I get that. I mean, and I'm going to go into that a little bit later as to, where this, you could argue whether it's appropriate or not, but it comes down to life or death. And so, I get that.
And much of it's cultural.
Yes. But, I saw where people who said that they have eaten dog meat, they didn't say it tasted like chicken.
No.
They said it tasted like a cross between beef and mutton. And it was pretty fatty and had a fragrance to it that was like...
Nasty.
Well, they were just saying like it was identifiable. That's the way they...
Oh, I bet it's identifiable.
Yeah, I would say it is. And it wasn't very succulent. I'm going to say probably the best way to put it, and a nice way to put it, is maybe gamey, right? It's gamey. It's something like you, just out in the woods and you shot a game. So there you go, gamey. But anyway, I also saw where mostly it's older men who consume it, because there's some faction that says it has medicinal properties, it brings good luck, fertility, that sort of thing. I don't think that you're going to find a lot of scientific evidence to support any of that.
I would doubt that very highly.
Us, to try to justify using those things, I don't think it's going to work. But the Humane Society International is where I got a lot of information about this, because for obvious reasons they are really aware of it. And I saw where South Korea has a thing that's called Bacchanal, where it's in the summer months, and that's where most of the dogs when most of the dogs are eaten. Indonesia, Vietnam, 25% of the population is said to consume dog meat, which is, that's substantial.
I know that according to research, Taiwan is the first Asian country to really crack down on the practice.
Yeah, it's banned now in Hong Kong, Taiwan, Thailand, and Singapore. And from the Humane Society, in India, yes. And I did see, this is really, it's disturbing. But they said, here's a description of the practice. Like, you get a truck and you load it with up to like $1,000 in the truck. It drives around for days. So they're sick, they're malnourished, they're thirsty. Of course, like, is that a good place for a dog fight or what? I would say. But, that's the whole thing, and talking about how this practice does a lot of bad things, obviously, but, it doesn't do anything except just promote rabies.
Right.
So, that's another thing that we got to look at. But something that I thought was extremely interesting and topical was that I did discover in 2018, President Trump signed the Dog and Cat Meat Prohibition Act as a provision of the Farm Bill. And this was spearheaded and sponsored by the Animal Hope and Wellness Foundation, which is a nonprofit that works with these, trying to stop the consumption of dogs and cats around the world, and basically just for animal health. And this was what, and I didn't realize that up until that bill was signed, that eating dogs and cats was legal in 44 states up until that time. And I just thought that was pretty amazing. I would think that would have been addressed some time ago.
Yes.
But it wasn't. But the Animal Health and Wellness Foundation, they stated this, and this is a quote from them: "This is a major victory for the animals, prohibiting the consumption of 2 entire species, while at the same time making America the leader at putting an end to this brutal practice worldwide."
And I'm going to give you a story on that.
Yeah, and I'm just going to say, it allows us, by having that bill in place, having that signed into law, that allows us to literally lead the world from the front, not behind, and to say, like, this is a practice that we condemn, and we can do it, and it's not hypocritical.
Right. Yeah, back in the early 90s, right as I was getting into law enforcement, I was also a partial owner of a sports club, and we were connected to a Chinese restaurant. I won't say the guy, I'm sure he's dead now, since I was pretty young. He was pretty old, some old guy. And what ended up happening was, health department comes in one afternoon while they weren't there because they took a break between like lunch and dinner. And I knew one of the guys, and he's like, can you walk me around the kitchen? And I said, well, I got to get permission. I don't really, we utilize the kitchen for that area for the sports bar, but we only have a small menu. He said, but I need to see in the freezers. And he had paperwork to show it. And I said, okay, well, if you've got the, paperwork, and, he had an animal control officer with him. And I said, well, this is a little different. And so he goes over to the freezer, opens the freezer, and I have pictures of these in my attic that are somewhere buried with a lot of my old stuff. Because I took a couple pictures. I had a little 35 millimeter Polaroid camera and a 110. You remember the old 110s cameras?
I remember the one called Diana.
Yeah. So they open the freezer up, and there's duck in there, there's chicken, and then there's 2 skinned cats hanging. And I had to take a double take. I thought, well, maybe it's some kind of exotic animal. The guy said, no, we've been getting complaints that these guys are, killing cats and getting them the hair off and all this, and skinning them and putting them in their food. One, I had never ate there, and I would never eat there again after that. But 2, I said, well, what are you going to charge him with? He said, well, actually, we're going to cite him because it was not illegal, but he was doing it for commercial purposes, and that was against the ordinances and stuff of the city and everything. And so it was shortly thereafter I sold my part out, and then decided to not mess with any of that anymore. But the people that were involved, they just got worked up. They argued about it and said their culture allows them to do it, and being Chinese, and the health department said, you're not in China, and your customers have no clue that you're putting this in some things. And I noticed that the pigeon population, after they closed, it regained back to where it was because they had awful small chicken wings.
Well,
True story.
Yeah, I mean, I've dissected cats in biology class and everything. It's just like, I just can't imagine eating a cat. Plus, I had 2 wonderful pet cats that I had to put to sleep for diseases. But I couldn't imagine, like, hey.
You wouldn't want my dogs anyway. We've had 4 since my wife and I have been married, and they live an average of 18 and 19 years is the minimum age those dogs reached, and that'd be some tough meat. Maybe not for some people. But,
yeah, I don't think so. I don't think so. But one of the things that also, and it's still performed in, there's traditions and rituals, and I noticed like where this thing goes back to like Cortez and the Aztecs, where they were consuming dogs and cats, and I think Native American Indians, North American Indians, have a role there as well. But one of the things I found that happens in the Philippines is called a cleansing ritual called da'es, and it's performed after a person dies unexpectedly, like with accidents or murders, or somebody's released from prison or witnessed death firsthand.
Right.
And they believe that the dogs have the purest soul of any animal comparable to the human soul. And so they sacrifice the dog.
Have you met a Chihuahua?
Have I met a Chihuahua?
Yeah.
I haven't had much dealing with a Chihuahua.
My wife had one for 19 years when I first met her.
Yeah.
They are the meanest. So there ain't no peaceful soul about that dog.
Yeah.
Or those dogs.
Yeah.
I'm not knocking Chihuahuas because love them to death, but they're just like having a little hand grenade. You could almost have little holster on your side, carry your Chihuahua around with you instead of carrying a gun. You just pick it up.
They're ferocious, aren't they?
Yeah.
I haven't spent much time with them. I had Cocker Spaniels, but you know, I just can't imagine. You know, they said that the dog's soul is sent as a messenger to communicate with ancient spirits, and is done through a shaman. So
I'm gonna go over some of the religious aspects a little later, but yeah.
I mean, it could be good theater, I guess. I don't know, but I don't really care about witnessing it. And then you can get into it more, but I know that Jewish and Islamic dietary laws forbid consumption of dog meat, and most European countries do that as well. But I noticed one of the things, like in wars and famines and that sort of thing, that was deemed appropriate for obvious reasons as we get back to the human survival thing.
Right.
But in Germany, they called it blockade mutton.
Or wiener dog for short.
Me as well.
That's where that breed comes from.
Yeah, so there you go. And in our own Civil War, animal consumption was used under certain circumstances, and horses were first, mules were second, dogs were last. And one thing that I never thought I would really find in the literature, but I did, was in the Lewis and Clark expeditions, is that Lewis ate dogs, but Clark wouldn't.
Never knew that.
No, I never saw
The
that.
more you know.
I never saw that in school.
No, I didn't either. Yeah, no.
But, you know, I probably, you know, I don't think I could do it. You know, maybe I could if I'm starving to death. I don't know.
I think I know enough about, not being arrogant, but I think I know enough about proteins from lagoons and different areas, and to pull what I would need, and I would hope a lot of people would be up on that. Or that would be you never know what you would do, but I would assume I would never. I just couldn't see that. You know, there's too many, unless you're in a hole somewhere and that pet or that animal's the only thing there, and there's no way you're getting out. But that's ridiculous. I don't believe in a no-win situation, as Captain Kirk said.
Yeah, there you go. Well, you know, when I was in med school and we were doing our dissections on cadaver and all that sort of thing, I remember the anatomy professor just said, like, you know, psoas major in humans is the equivalent of filet mignon. That's always stuck with me. So
It would have been see something, say something to me.
So, you know, it's just one of those things. But it's best to, you know, I've got a thing that goes into two medical aspects of this. One just being roundworm infection, and the other rabies. But I think, why don't you hit the other topics first in regards to what you were discussing? Because I think I'll save my medical stuff for a little later.
Okay. Basically, you were talking about religious, you know, aspects. You know, and that's for not just dogs and cats, but any animal. There are a lot of religions, or even some people don't consider what they have or what their culture is as religious, but it is. From Hinduism to Islam, Judaism, Santeria, which is, I think that's the Afro-Cuban religion, voodoo.
Yeah, I was going to say a little voodoo, actually.
Yeah, voodoo and all that. Some's like an Afro-Cuban religion type thing. The other one's more Haiti and all that. You know, some of Louisiana's, which it is. But they believe in sacrifice, and many of them, after they sacrifice, depending on which type of religion, then a lot of times that sacrificial offering is then either eaten or given to the poor. And most of them do not allow for, but it's got to be like goats, sheep, cows, all that stuff. But there are some, especially in the voodoo rituals and stuff, that have used dog and cats. I mean, I will tell you, as a police officer, you know, I went on and I told the story before, quite off camera, but I had a partner who was scared to death of anything to do with the occult or anything, and we always used to have to go into the little state park, and I worked for a small little police department when I first started, but it had a state park there that the park rangers would always call for assistance, and you'd get people in there all the time, usually younger. Once in a while they're middle-aged, but they would have the robes and stuff on doing sacrifices. Sometimes it'd be funny because of the, I don't know how you sacrifice a whole chicken from Kroger's when it's already dead, but they would actually utilize a cat, and that's when you'd have to go after them and stuff. If you caught them in there, they'd take a puppy or something. So we ran into this many times, and so I know, even if it's not widely reported, I would say it's hard because doing some of the research, the only thing you pull up at this present time is President Trump talking about, or former President Trump, excuse me, talking about Springfield, Ohio, which is where my mother lives, and they're eating the dogs, they're eating the cats, all that. There's some hilarious memes actually on there, on the internet about that. But you go through about every page, and that's all it talks about. And a lot of the original statistics have been pulled out. So I went to the FBI, as I usually do, NIH, anywhere I can pull stats from, and a lot of these sacrifices are done because like you were saying earlier, in wartime, it's the availability of what they actually have in their area to be able to sacrifice, and what they believe. Now, not saying Muslims or people who do Judaism or Hinduism do that, but because they all have their own specific way. My wife works for the nutritional services as their CFO type person or office manager, and so she has to contract these people to actually do halal meat, kosher and all this. So they actually go to the plant sometime and show them how the animals are blessed and what parts they can cut out and all that, and then to do away with the scraps and everything. So, but there's a certain process that they have to go through to do that. And whether you believe in that or not, and I know the PETA and the SPCA and all that, they're not big fans because they actually have programs that help, communities deal with interventions when they have cultural differences like we're having right now with places. And why nobody's confirmed whether the dog and cat, of course there was a cat that was killed and eaten by somebody from Canton, Ohio, I believe it was, and not necessarily from Springfield, Ohio. There's video footage online of the actual body cam footage. A lot of the information has now been either blocked or skewed, and I'm not a conspiracy theorist, but it's next to impossible to find because they're trying to make it, in our political environment, they're trying to make it to where one side looks ridiculous over the other. But you can also, they are having issues in a lot of places with ducks and geese and different things, and you don't have to travel too far in most states to find some community that's either come into the U.S. or that has not quite assimilated, and they all have different practices. We used to have to do what was called cultural sensitivity, not as it's known now, but to know that because somebody does something in their community and they're newer to the U.S. as a citizen or a quasi-citizen, as it will, then they get by, and you have to give more discretion to those folks until they learn the laws of the land and the rules and why it's wrong to do what they're doing. So I just bring that up because, as Christians, we're not supposed to do sacrifice. And there are still Christians that do sacrifice, especially in the Holy Land. They got the Armenian Church, I believe, still does some. They may use a lamb or a rooster, and this is usually done around Easter time and all this. You have in Mexico, it's very prevalent. And then you have some Christians, such as, I believe it is the Catholics and certain Orthodox Christians still do it at Easter over there. And, that's a big question for a lot of people. Is sacrifice a normal thing for, religious beliefs in the Christian community? And the answer would be no if it's a true Christian community. You just have to look at Hebrews 9:12, and it'll tell you that he who entered once for all into the holy places, not by means of the blood of goats and calves, but by the means of his own blood, meaning Jesus Christ, thus securing an eternal redemption, which means he was the ultimate sacrifice, so it's no longer needed. So why these folks do this and believe they need to do it, I have no clue. But usually it's lambs that are in the Christian community that are ones that are slaughtered, and then the burnt offerings, and then a lot of times they eat what they actually sacrifice. And I'm just telling you from my point of view, I'm not saying anything about other religions, but as a Christian, that's a no-no. And you're more than happy to email me, and I would be more than happy to discuss it with you. But and there's a great article from, what was that, Billy Graham, I think he did that, June 20th, 2013 actually, and that's where it comes from. The question was, I've been trying to read up on the Old Testament recently, and I'd like to ask you a question. Why do we still do animal sacrifices that people were commanded to do back in the Old Testament? And then Billy Graham has his answer, basically going over, Hebrews 9:12, which is what I just covered, and that was under the ESV version. Jesus came and lived a holy life and sacrificed himself, which was his blood, the ultimate sacrifice for all of us, past, present, and future. So that's my religious take on that.
There you go. So, no, you're a Bible, you instruct, you teach Bible study, right?
Yeah, the names of God. I take classes and equip classes at our church and with people, and also am a very, very devout theological student. So I don't just look at Christian religions. I try and know as much as I can and talk to people from all religions. That way I have an understanding, because that way we have a place in the middle to meet. But I'm just telling you that if you think you can prove that otherwise, you're not reading the same Bible.
Yeah, well, it's an issue that I had no idea that all of the history of it. And, I just thought that was pretty remarkable, as far as just the historical aspects of the consumption of dog and cat meat, because I never really gave it much thought. But now, seeing it's in the news every day.
And see, I didn't even realize former President Trump had signed that into law, but for all the joking about Springfield, Ohio, and what he's saying, we have had a major crisis here in the U.S., and I've covered this many times, and Steve and I were discussing doing a podcast on it about the influx of migrants, and I have agape love, so we welcome everybody, under my faith, but assimilating and making sure that they are not criminals and they're doing things the way they're supposed to do, that's a big difference. And even if you take all that out, take the political out, and that's why I said we're going to podcast, there's some serious thoughts that needs to be given to under the Department of Immigration and Naturalization and Homeland Security. If you allow within 4 years the equivalent of 36 to 38 states worth of people in here, just ponder this for a moment. What's the number of people, if you added us now, we went from 50 states to 86 states. I know I've spoken on this before briefly, but if you take, so we have now the equivalent of 86 new states, or 36 new states, which would literally take the U.S. to 86 states as far as, for accounting purposes. We do not have that in all the different areas that we need to operate to take care of those people. We just didn't overnight, or within a short period of time, certify cops, doctors, nurses, mailmen, grocery workers, the amount that takes care of all you gotta do is add up the 36 states that they list on the government sites and start adding up all the different numbers of specialties and just general purpose workers to take care of that amount of people, and you're gonna say we're woefully unprepared to do this.
Oh yeah. And the World Health Organization, warns that eating dog meat and cat meat possesses human health risk, and one is it's called Toxocariasis, and it's basically roundworm infection, and there's about 10,000 cases a year in America as it stands right now, but I think there's going to be a lot more. And the risk factors: poverty, subtropical regions, contaminated soil, young age, and increased concentrations of dogs and cats, and the only thing not directly tied to the U.S. and that's a subtropical climate right now, because we've got all this influx of people from other countries and that sort of thing, and they're bringing their culture with them, and they're also bringing diseases with them that we, basically we're looking at like tuberculosis, hepatitis.
Because I don't believe they're screened for a lot of these things. From what I've seen on reports and read, they're not screened like a full medical screening when they do. How could you? As I said, who has the resources to sit there and screen, thousands of people a day at the border at different crossings?
No. And then, Toxocariasis is present, and it's present coming over the border, I mean, you know that some people have it. There's no question about that, along with the other communicable diseases that we talked about. But you know, again, it's TB, HIV, hepatitis B, hepatitis C. I mean, it's overwhelming the U.S. healthcare system.
It is. And, you know, speaking of going back to Springfield, not making fun of former President Trump because of it, just keep mentioning Springfield, but in the last few years, Springfield's HIV percentage has gone up, you know, over 800%. TB has gone up over 500%. They said there's so many, the birthing centers are filling up with women having to have C-sections, which are mostly Haitian, not knocking the Haitians, but because they have HIV. And that's a lot of stuff that's in your area, not mine, but I was reading that going, man, that's going to put a hurt and a strain on your, you know, on your ability to service those people. The funds, you only have so many funds.
Well, the thing about it too is when a system gets overwhelmed, and I mean, it just is. I mean, it just is. It's overwhelmed and basically understaffed. And if you urgently try to fix that problem, what's going to suffer is quality of care. Right. That, you know, when you do things like that,
is that called quantitative care or quantitative?
It's just the quality of care. There's no way that you can keep that same.
No, I'm saying it switches to a quantitative care, which means you're just trying to get as much as you can done, even if it's mediocre people handling it.
Yeah, I mean, it's you are put in a situation to where your back's up against the wall and you're just doing everything that you possibly can.
Yeah, and you know, if you look at our Bowling Green area, there's over, I believe it's 110 to 130 different people groups, because we have a federal education center here brought in by the Clinton era, and it's made Bowling Green, you know, part of the wonderful place that it is. But those people do come in and they are screened, but it is getting, you know, it is growing so fast that in certain regions, you know, you might wait 3 months to see a doctor for something.
Yeah.
You know.
And I can just tell you as a single human being, man, doctor, whatever you want to call me, I just remember.
First, your wife says you're not single, but you might be if you say that again.
There we go. Could be, but the whole point is like you're overwhelmed. I remember being a resident, and you know, I was on call this one weekend, and for whatever reason it was like we were so overwhelmed with operative casualties, gunshot wounds, stabbings, car wrecks, you know, with multiple casualties. And I just remember looking out, you know, as I was coming up from the ER to go to the OR, and I saw the gurneys out in the hall waiting for surgery, and it was just astounding. And I'm going like, you know, I'm going to be involved in most of those cases, and you know, and it was, for the most part, it was like 67 straight hours, and so it's like, you know, that's just a little microcosm of what we're looking at, because when you talk about millions of people just inundating the system, I mean, it's a disaster. I mean, it's a disaster.
And with those cultural differences not being addressed, and maybe that's something we need to look at as communities. And I think that our area, Bowling Green, does a very good job. So I'll give them props for that, of trying to handle that and trying to, you know, put people in between. There's a lot of community care, along with some of the great churches like Living Hope Baptist Church here, and some of the others, maybe Hillview, some of them, that actually go out and try and help these people, and then culturally put liaisons in there to find out and kind of guide them and lead them, like, hey, that's not really appropriate in this area. That's not really, you know, because I know you can drive down the middle of the city and you see, by where I used to live, the city had gotten on 2 or 3 Burmese families for having, like, you know, commercial chicken farms in the middle of the city in this little, you know, 0.15 of an acre area, and they'd have tarps over and have the chickens and a bunch of cats running around. I didn't want to know what was going on with the cats. You'd always see a bunch of cats and you see no cats, and a bunch of cats, no cats. But you always see a bunch of chickens running around too. And so I think finally the city, because all that got pulled down and taken rid of, said you can't be, you know, you can't be doing that. And we have people in here that come from, you know, a not so nice area of Bowling Green, which most of the areas are nice, but like I'll say the poor area. And it's funny, I went to pick one of them up because you give them the right to take their jiu-jitsu classes, and you know, it's nothing for them to come out and kick a chicken because there'd be like 8 or 9 chickens and 10 cats on their porch because they had an old area at Bowling Green that's off of 9th Street and Eleventh and all those areas. And that's what would happen. And the one guy used to joke, and it wrote funny. I said, "What are you gonna do?" He says, "Well, I'm gonna have chicken wings and putty tap for dinner." Now that was a joke years ago, and I think you know, I hope that wasn't the case actually.
Well, it's too late now.
Yeah.
Well, I don't know about, I'm just thinking, you know, there's IHOP, right? International House of Pets.
You are. Remember, if you have something, you can send all complaints to Frank at Snodgrass Art Gallery or Steve at.
I just kind of came up with that at the last minute. You know, I didn't really have that in the script. But
no, with that mind, I can imagine.
It kind of fits, though, right?
National House of Pets.
So anyway, sorry about that. But back to this other, this disease caused by an infection with larvae of the roundworm that's found in dogs and cats, and it's called the Toxocariasis and Toxocariasis for the cats, dogs, and cats respectively. It's most commonly seen in puppies and kittens versus more mature animals. And humans become infected by ingesting the infective eggs or through contaminated soil containing dog or cat feces. And these animal hosts will harbor the worms in their guts. They shed the eggs in their feces, and the eggs remain infectious for years outside the host. So that's kind of what you're looking at. You can also contract it by eating undercooked meat, and you know, it's usually boiled or stewed. And you know, here's the question I have: is when is your dog done? I don't know the answer to that, but
you know, but a lot of cultures, excuse me, they do take the animals, and from some of the Getty images and some of the others that I've seen online, doing, you know, some extensive research, it looks like a lot of them just almost like that is the two main areas. They either boil it or they try and cook it to where it's in a stew, and they don't necessarily fry it. Now they do once in a while will fry the meats up depending on how, on like a skewer, like a stick. And cook it.
Well, I'm just saying, if I'm forced to eat it, if after I've read all this stuff, I want to make sure it's done.
And don't microwave it.
No, I'm just saying, it's a point that I just want to throw out there. So after you eat it, the eggs hatch, the larvae penetrate the intestinal wall. Just think about the visual on this, and then it's carried by the circulation to many tissues throughout. And most of the infections are asymptomatic, but you can see fever, myalgia or muscle aches, weight loss, cough, rashes, hepatosplenomegaly, enlarged liver, and spleen. And it's accompanied by eosinophilia. And this took me back to my pediatric days, because we would see parasitic illnesses in a lot of children and that sort of thing. And eosinophils are a type of white blood cell. But they're especially, and eosinophilia just means there's an increased number of eosinophils. But it's pretty much associated with a parasitic infection. So like if you do what's called the complete blood count with differential, and you get the red blood cells and white blood cells, and you break it all down and you see that eosinophil count way high, then as a physician, you know, you're thinking like, you know, parasite infection is certainly possible. But there's 4 types of disease. I thought this was, you know, this is really pretty interesting to me, but there's one that's called ocular larva migrans, it's OLM, and that's a leading infectious cause of blindness in kids. And it's in developing countries, which, you know, you can almost put us in that category in a certain geographic area because of the diseases that are there that weren't before. So I can say that with some confidence. But this ocular disease presents with unilateral vision loss, and it's usually in kids between 5 and 6 years old, and it can cause secondary glaucoma. And visceral larva migrans is VLM. This can affect any organ system: liver, heart, lungs, brain, muscle. Death may result from severe cardiac, pulmonary, or neurological involvement. So this is a disease that certainly may be fatal. Neurotoxocariasis, it goes into the central nervous system and cause a meningoencephalitis, presents with seizures, encephalopathy, and neuropsychiatric symptoms. And then there's a covert Toxocariasis, which means that patients have a positive Toxocariasis serology associated with symptoms, but it's not of OLM or VLM origin. And Toxocariasis is much more virulent in humans than the dog version. So I don't know why. Cat versus dog, cat wins on that one as far as being the worst. The treatment is with drugs called albendazole and mebendazole, either one for 5 days. Could require surgical intervention even. The prognosis is usually good, but chronic disease may be associated with epilepsy, cognitive delay, vision loss, including blindness, pneumonia, and death. So, and there's no vaccine for it or anything like that.
That's pretty extensive.
Yeah, it is. And I really had no concept of basically that's what you're living with, basically with pets. And that's why you get your pets checked out by the veterinarian on a regular basis.
Get their shots. And
get everything taken care of. And rabies is another one that it's caused by the RABV virus. And this is from the Vietnam National Institute of Hygiene and Epidemiology, and it shows a significant portion of rabies patients become infected after killing, butchering, or eating dogs. And the virus can be killed by high temperatures during cooking, but still can be transmitted. It kind of goes back to our microplastics talk about the knives and cutting boards, that sort of thing. So it's an easy place to contract the virus. And if you break it down into 2 categories, it's bite versus non-bite. And obviously the bite of an infected, I mean, I've seen that
Bite
before.
breaking the skin?
Yes, the bite breaks the skin. The virus is contained in the saliva of the animal, and basically the victim gets inoculated with the rabies virus. And once it's broken the skin, it gets into the underlying nerves, the peripheral nerves. But the virus's sole mission is to get to the central nervous system, brain and spinal cord.
Right.
And so once it reaches the brain, it will cause destruction of the neurons there. Concerning non-bite, ingestion can lead to contamination of the oral mucosa, which is the lining of the mouth. And it's rare, but it can occur. And the main risk, again, is from killing and preparing the meat. And also, I found this of interest, but aerosol or droplet transmission is possible. It's been documented in cave systems, and they got it from bats, which is like the #1 carrier of rabies. So they said this is noteworthy, that if you are in a room and like you are sleeping or someone else is sleeping or whatever, and there's a bat in the room, then they said, assume you've been bitten. So that needs to be brought out for educational purposes, because they said, like, you could get bitten and not even know it, because it's going to be like a little, pin prick in your skin, something like that. So
this is Dracula.
Yes, you would know probably. Well, maybe if Dracula put that heebie-jeebie spell on you, don't know.
One of his hoes, yeah.
But the rabies is broken down into different phases, and it's a pretty nasty disease. Really, it's a pretty nasty disease, and it just makes me think how close I've been to getting bitten. You know,
We had a guy here that was bitten a little over a month ago, riding his motorcycle, was on his way here and to class, and said he wasn't going to be in class tonight. He'd be in a couple days later because he had to go get checked out for rabies. And I said, okay. And so he told me later, was telling us the story that he stopped, dog ran out, dog had no tags, no shots. He knows where the dog lives because the owners have several dogs. Bit him in the ankle, broke the skin, and he was worried he was past the time. And then I found out, no, you've got several days to actually, start that medication for it, and then they can test. But the only way still to do to my understanding, to actually know is, send the dog's brain off. But they're saying that there's other ways now, but I've not heard of that.
Well, we can get into that. I can tell you a great dog story.
But he didn't have rabies, so he was glad.
Yeah, it's absolutely frightening. It's absolutely frightening because I was out in the country. This was some time ago, and I like to ride out there because it's just peaceful and all that sort of thing. At least you think it is. And I was way out kind of in the middle of nowhere, and like I'm going to say about 18 miles an hour or something like that. And they say that to outrun a dog, you need to go 30 miles an hour, and you need to be able to sustain 30 miles an hour for quite a period, right? And which is
insane.
That's insane. I mean, you're talking about these world-class Tour de France guys, riding probably 26 miles an hour or something like that. And I'm not even close to that category. You put me downhill, I might be able to go for a while. But anyway, I noticed there was a pack of wild dogs coming at me. I mean, they were like, the best I could tell, there were like 7 of them. Oh. And I'm going like, there's no way that I can outrun these dogs.
Because the dogs were talking about the old Richard Pryor skit.
Yes. And I was like,
You're about to get eaten or something.
Yes, and it's like, so I just like, there's no way I'm going to outrun them. There's no way. And I'm going like, a pack of dogs like that, they've got that wolf mentality. I mean, they got that pack mentality. And so these were not any small dogs either. And so all I could do, I said, okay, I'm just going to stop my bike. I took off my jersey, wrapped my left arm. I did have pepper spray in one hand, and I used to carry a 10-inch blade with me because it gets nasty out in the country sometimes. You don't know what's going to happen out there. And I can go on and on about bicycle stories. It'd make a good podcast, I think. But I decided, the only thing I know to do is charge the pack. That's the only thing I know to do because I can't outrun them and they're coming for me. So just maybe, if you charge the pack, they're going to say well, he is crazier than we are.
Yeah. And
so I just started screaming and just went right into the pack. And the only one that kind of did not, they kind of dispersed and they flanked you. I mean, this is military technique.
Yeah.
And so anyway, the one that was the alpha, he was kind of there showing his alpha maleness. And I sprayed him with the pepper spray, and then that backed him off. And then the rest of them just kind of looked at him going like, well, if you're not going to go get him, we're not going to go get him. So I feel like, I really got lucky because I think I could have just been torn to pieces.
Oh, yeah.
I mean...
Yeah, they get wolf-like if they get in packs like that. They can do a lot of damage. I mean, they can rip you to shreds, literally.
Oh, yeah.
And joking aside.
Yeah, and I just thought that's the only thing I knew to do. Because there's no way, there's no way you're going to outrun them. I mean, I was riding one time, and this Great Dane was right beside me. I was going 30 miles an hour, and this Great Dane was right beside me, stride for stride. And I'm going like, well, I think I got you. But then I kept, I was kept waiting for him to die off, but he didn't. So I just stopped I stopped my bike, and that dog, he put his paws on my shoulders and just started licking me. All he wanted was just some attention. He's just like, hey, don't think you're gonna outrun me.
Yeah.
And he goes, but I just want you to pet me.
I need a hug.
Yeah, he just needed a hug. And I gave him one too. I was going like, hey, congratulations.
Yeah.
But back to this thing, there's an acute neurologic phase, and it's called paralytic rabies, and you get headaches, neck stiffness, weakness, tingling pains, and paralysis. And there's another subcategory of it, and this is the one that is played out all the time in the movies, I guess. But it's called furious rabies, and there's agitation, aggression, restlessness, seizures, delirium, hallucinations, muscle twitches, fever, tachycardia, hyperventilation, increased salivation, different sized pupils, which is called anisocoria, hydrophobia, fear of water, and aerophobia, fear of air being blown in your face. Had no idea.
Wow.
But other than that, you're okay.
Yeah.
But it can cause coma and death, and there's about 59,000 deaths per year from rabies. And the way that you diagnose it now, they have saliva tests, skin biopsies, cerebral spinal fluid exam via lumbar puncture. There's a blood test, MRI of the brain, test the animal, which we were talking about, which requires euthanasia, and you have to look at the dog's brain and all that sort of thing. But and then the treatment is basically just referred to as post-exposure prophylaxis. And the rabies vaccine consists of 4 shots in 14 days.
Yeah, that's not near as bad, because I don't know why it keeps happening here, but a young lady, because we live in there's kind of a country area back behind us and all that, but one of the young ladies, parents are both professionals, sweet girl, was out of classes for a couple weeks, and the dad says, well, I think she's okay to be back. She get bit by a baby raccoon. She was out in the back where their woods are and stuff. They couldn't catch the raccoon, so they went to the doctor. The doctor said, well, we don't know if it's going to carry rabies, but we're going to have to put you under, and she's mid-teens. They said, we're going to have to put you under that treatment. I said, is that the old, like, so many shots in the belly for 7 days, 7 shots? She said, no, it was like it was several shots over so many days is what it was, and they did it as a precautionary measure. And she said, but it wasn't pleasant. She said the first 2 they give you, I guess, they give them anywhere now. So she said the first 2 they did in the buttocks, and then the other 2 was like in the arms or somewhere.
Well, that's meant to destroy, to teach the body to destroy the virus before it gets to the brain.
Oh, okay.
So, and also if you're bitten, you can use, they've got an immune globulin that, it's an antibody that can be done before any kind of vaccinations are performed. So that, that is human rabies immune globulin before any kind of vaccination. And the other thing to do, the first thing, if you're ever bitten, is to wash the wound with soap and water. If you have a povidone iodine solution is best. That's like betadine, which is like a surgical scrub. But there's no cure that's available for it. And once the virus involves the brain, it's protected by the blood-brain barrier, and there's some property in the virus that causes that to lock down even further, so the medication can't get to it to kill it. So if you don't have an early vaccination or antibiotic treatment for the rabies, it's nearly always fatal. So I didn't, it's been a long time since I've even looked at this kind of data, but I find it pretty frightening.
I do too, and I mean, there's people there are sick people all over the world. Not saying it's a cultural thing, like I said, and who are we to judge other than if it's your pets are missing or something, or it's becoming a hindrance and to the population in your area, or to an overburdening of the system because of the health factors and everything, and if it happens to turn into crimes. but there are a lot. Unfortunately, I'm a big animal activist as far as taking care of and supporting dogs and cats or any type of pets that people have. But there's a thing called animal crushing that's horrific also, and there's been animal crushing, and there's also sometimes they'll do like the sacrifice online. Animal crushing is just a term that's used. It's actually against the law. I think it's U.S. Title 18 that it has.
Well, it sounds bad.
Yes, well, it's what it actually does. It's purposely you crush, burn, drown, suffocate, impale, or otherwise subject to serious bodily harm, as it's defined in Section 1365, the U.S. Code, and it violates those sections 2241 and I think 2242. And people actually videotape themselves doing this. There have been several cases. The first one actually got prosecuted, and which was the first successful case back in 2010, and PETA actually helped out with it. This guy was actually sending out emails, videos to people to watch, and he was doing all kinds of disgusting things with these dogs and cats, and then having people basically pay for it. And so there have been several instances of that, and it's also the same way when it comes to how to sacrifice or how to do things and best ways to prepare these animals if you're going to consume them. And that's just, we find it appalling because anybody with any from an American standpoint, it's disgusting for most people, and but these were Americans that were doing it to try to make that almighty buck. So just be aware that there's a lot of crazy people out there, and if you see something, like I said earlier, you need to say something, because and then just do not take everything out on all the the migrants that in your area and automatically assume they're going to steal your pet cat or your dog or whatever it might be, because that's not necessarily, getting to know people and their culture is one way to actually help them assimilate into the area, because there's most of them, if they don't speak English very well, they're going to be apprehensive and they're going to stick closer to their normal culture because they don't know any other way. They came here, they haven't assimilated, they haven't been taught yet. Maybe their children are going to school, maybe they aren't yet. So they just need people to show them some kindness and love within the communities and to help them. Now the criminal element, throw them out.
Well, the whole thing is just, it's disastrous on many levels.
Well, from the health standpoint,
yeah,
if they're doing it, spread something to you because this is a new neighbor or something, or somebody around, or maybe it's something they're doing, their children, and I'm not starting any panic, but their children are going to school with your children. You don't know what gets, like you were saying, there's things that could be aerosol, there's things that, could be passed by any number of different ways.
Well, I mean, diseases that we pretty much eradicated
Right.
are going to be having a resurgence.
And we have had some resurgences according to, the Border Patrol and Department of Homeland Security.
Yeah, I mean, it's like, and I was just listening to some of these Senate hearings, and they were just talking about some of these hospitals in some of these sanctuary cities are so overrun that they can't function, and it's going to be funded by taxpayer dollars, but it's just it's overwhelming. The thing that really bothers me about it is because I know what it's like to take care of a patient, and you have to really give that patient all of yourself to make this whole thing work. And when you're spread so thin like that, it's going to be quality that is going to suffer. And so it's kind of a cascade of doom effect, if you will.
Which is why, as we've done a podcast on, and nothing wrong with it, because I told you I absolutely love the nurse practitioners that are at my doctor's office. Great bunch of people there. However, it just increases, and that's where you're seeing a lot of this blow up, the number of nurse practitioners, physician's assistants, because that's what's going to be your primary care coming up. And as you said, it's not that you're knocking it down if they're actually, in my opinion, as a consumer and as a patient, if they're actually supervised by an RD or an MD, rather a real doctor. But it is just why 27 different states have allowed these people to go out on their own and operate as if they were physicians, actual MDs. And the more that we get into things like this, the more it reflects back on eating the dogs and cats or anything like that. And the more that these unsanitary and uncleanly, cultural ways are actually not done away with, and the American ways and adopted to, assimilated to, we're just gonna explode. So you're gonna be lucky to see an actual MD, I think, in the next few years. It's gonna be rare. You're gonna end up seeing that nurse practitioner, you're gonna see that physician's assistant, and you've had stories, so have I. That's gonna be the first 2 or 3 visits. Well, I don't wanna wait to find out if I've got something serious for 2 or 3 visits when it could have been found out right up front.
Yeah. And more importantly, I'm just thinking, like, if I went to the Philippines and I wanted to conduct one of those rituals, would the shaman accuse me of scope creep?
Sure.
Because I'm thinking, like, hey, if he can do it, I can do it.
Yeah.
It's
great.
So I'll just leave you with that.
Yeah, please do.
And I'll see you at the IHOP.
We want to thank you guys again. If you have any questions, feel free to get in touch with us. Our channel has all of our contact info and everything. We hope to be moving into a studio within the next 2 to 3 months. We have a nice place now, but just to take things up a notch. So that way you can get a more personalized feel for us. And we welcome all of you to continue subscribing, continue watching, welcome anybody that's new. And like I said, if you have suggestions for podcasts, we have a list of them, but you're more than welcome if it's something interesting we haven't thought of. Steve and I we're both retired, and so other than Steve's painting and what I do, the martial arts and stuff, and we both do some other things together. So as far as blockchain technology and all that, and charitable work, we really look forward to continuing the podcast and continue to watch it grow. So until next time, thank you. Be happy, be safe, and be healthy.
It's all about education and expanding your knowledge base. And that if we can do that, if you can, for me, if someone can watch our podcast, and if they can take away just one element of something, then we've won. We definitely won.
Anything that may help them prevent or not cost them something, whether it's health-wise, money-wise, decision-wise, that helps them in a better way and helps improve their quality of life. Yes, we definitely can consider that a success.
Yep. So thank you very much for tuning in.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to the Dr. Frank and Steve podcast. If you enjoyed this podcast, please hit follow or subscribe on the link provided so you can stay up to date on new episodes. Until next time, stay healthy and stay safe.